There's a bottle of port on the table in front of me. It's older than my marriage was. My husband Jim kept it for 40 years, waiting for the right day. He used to say, "We'll open it when we finally get to Porto, Carol." He died before we ever did. And tonight, I'm going to open it alone. My name is Carol. I'm 66 years old. For 34 years, I was a school librarian in a small town on the coast of Maine, the kind of place where everyone knows which pew you sit in and how you take your coffee. I was Jim's wife for 41 years, and when he died, I became something I had no idea how to be, a widow. People began speaking to me in that soft, careful voice, the one you use for something fragile. They told me, kindly, that my life now was about slowing down, getting my affairs in order, being looked after. What I'm about to tell you is how, at 66, with everyone I love certain I was making a terrible mistake, I got on a plane by myself and started my life over in a country I had never seen. But let me go back to the garden. Jim didn't get sick. There was no long goodbye, no time to say the things you're supposed to say. It was an ordinary Saturday in May. He was in the garden, staking the tomatoes, the way he did every spring. I was inside making iced tea, and when I looked out the window, he was on the ground beside the tomato cages, and the world I had lived in for 41 years was simply over. A heart attack, they said. He was gone before the ambulance reached our road. The first year I don't remember well. People bring casseroles, and then they stop. The couples we'd known for decades drifted away, the way couples do around a woman who is suddenly one instead of two. I kept setting the table for two out of habit, and then sitting there looking at the empty chair. And slowly I noticed something that frightened me more than the loneliness. The world had quietly decided I was finished. My daughter Becca began managing me, my appointments, my mail, my meals. Out of love, I know that. My sister Nancy started every sentence with, "At your age, Carol." Strangers called me young lady in the voice that means the opposite. I was 66 years old and healthy and wide awake at 3 a.m, and everyone around me had folded my future up small and set it on a shelf, like a book nobody expects to be read again. And the worst part was, I had started to believe them. It was the bottle that changed everything. Almost 2 years after Jim died, I finally made myself clean out his study. On the top shelf of the closet, behind his old fishing tackle, I found it. The port he had saved my whole married life, wrapped in one of his flannel shirts, and tucked beneath it a folded piece of paper, soft with age. It was a list, in his handwriting and mine, both. We'd made it years ago on some winter night, a little tipsy and dreaming. "Someday," it said across the top, and under it, "See where the port is made. Ride a tram by the sea. Watch the sunset over the Douro. Porto, Portugal." I sat on the floor of that closet, holding the list, and something in me that had been asleep for 2 years opened one eye. Someday was never coming. There was no someday left. There was only now or never. I didn't tell anyone at first. I just started reading the way a librarian does. I learned that Portugal offers a visa, the D7, for people with a steady income, a pension, like the survivor's benefits Jim had left me. I learned that Porto sits in one of the safest countries in the world, that a woman could walk home alone there after dark. I read for weeks at that same 3 a.m., and for the first time since the garden, I wasn't only grieving, I was curious. Then I told my family. Becca cried. "Mom, you can't be serious. You're 66. You don't speak Portuguese. You'll be all alone over there." My sister was blunter. "This isn't brave, Carol. It's reckless. What would Jim think?" That one stopped me cold. What would Jim think? I sat with it a long time, and then I understood. Jim was the one who had written "someday" at the top of that list. Jim was the one who believed we still had adventures left in us. The only person who had never once called me too old was him. So I renewed my passport. I sold the house where we'd raised our family, a harder day than I'll say here. I packed 2 suitcases, and I wrapped that bottle of port back in Jim's flannel shirt, laid it carefully between my sweaters, and carried it across an ocean. And for a while, I thought my sister was right. Grief, it turns out, packs itself in your suitcase and travels with you. My first weeks in Porto, the loneliness was worse than it had ever been at home, because at home, at least, the silence was familiar. Here, I was a stranger who couldn't order bread. The paperwork nearly broke me. An agency called AIMA, appointment after appointment, a form I didn't have, the wrong window, another month's wait. Porto in winter is gray, and it rains for days, and the old apartments have no heating. I sat wrapped in a blanket, in a flat that wasn't mine, in a country where I knew no one, and I thought, "Carol, what have you done, you foolish old woman?" One gray afternoon, in a cafe by the river, a wave of missing him hit me so hard I couldn't breathe. I had my phone out. I was looking at flights home, and a hand touched my shoulder. It was the woman from the apartment below mine, Fernanda, 71, a widow herself. She spoke little English, and I spoke no Portuguese, but she sat down and she saw exactly what she was looking at, because she had been there. She simply held my hand until I could breathe again. Then she walked me to the market and taught me the word for bread. Little by little, the city stopped frightening me. My rent was about 900 euros for a small flat with a sliver of a view of the Douro. A coffee cost 80 cents. My health coverage cost far less than the fear I'd been carrying in America. And every morning I was still sad, but I was also, quietly, alive. Fernanda folded me into her circle of friends, most of us widows, who meet on Thursdays. I found the most beautiful bookshop in the world here, a place called Lelo, all carved wood and a curling red staircase, and I go just to breathe it in. Once a librarian, always. I ride the old tram down to Foz, where the river meets the ocean, and I watch the water the way Jim and I always meant to. I, who had let my daughter sort my mail, was making my own way alone through a foreign country at 66. Becca came in the spring, braced to find me broken. Instead, I walked her along the Douro. I introduced her to Fernanda. I showed her my tram, my bookshop, my life. On her last evening, she took my hand and said, "Mom, you're different here. You're not just okay. You're you again." And she cried, but it was a different kind of crying. And then, on a warm evening on the riverbank, with the 6 bridges lit and the port lodges glowing across the water in Gaia, I finally did the thing I had crossed an ocean to do. I opened Jim's bottle. I poured 2 glasses. I set one across from me where he would have sat, and I told him we had finally made it. I'm 66 years old. I live alone in a city on a river, and my life is not over. It has only begun again. I still talk to Jim. I still cry some mornings. Courage, I've learned, was never about not being afraid, and it was never about leaving him behind. I brought him with me. I'm living the someday for the both of us. If there is anyone out there who has been told they're too old to begin again by their children, their friends, or the quiet voice in their own head, I want you to hear me. Too old is a story other people tell about your life. You don't have to believe it. If this touched something in you, stay with me. There are more stories like mine coming. Subscribe, and I'll see you next time.